Hello, my name is Nick Dove and this is the Afterlife Pod. If you want to contact me, my email is podafterlife@gmail.com. Today I've got an experience like I always do, just one from the endurf.org website. Check it out, there's thousands of experiences on there, so you don't have to just listen to me talking about them. There's plenty of other ways to get your information on this topic. It's a fascinating topic. There's many YouTube videos, many podcasts about them. So if this piques your interest, I urge you to investigate your scope and widen it to research it yourself and find out if it resonates with you at a deeper level through as many means as possible, because it is the best way to do it. Do your own research and see if it is something that resonates as the truth with you. So today I've got an experience from the endurf site, like I just said. This one is from a guy called Brian T. The following experience was written in 2004. I have to begin my account by pointing out that it is not possible to convey the richness of my near-death experience with words. It's a bit like trying to depict a magnificent sunset by drawing it in the sand with a stick. My memory of it hasn't faded much, if at all, over 30 years. Although it was probably brought about by an overdose of drugs, it was nothing like a hallucination. I knew it had not been any sort of dream. In fact, it was far more real than normal waking consciousness. This aspect is so hard to explain. I left with the certainty that a much greater reality exists beyond this one. I had seen it and been in it. What happened to me was real. I mean really real. As if normal life is just an illusion in which we are immersed for our time here. Since the advent of virtual reality, I have found that it is a good way to think of this existence. This reality is a wondrous, awesome creation and has its purpose. But an immensely greater reality exists. After 5 days of hard drugs and little food or sleep, I had made my way to bed and collapsed there, totally out of it. I did not find myself looking down on my body, as reported in some near-death experiences. But then, it was in the middle of the night in a pitch-dark room. I became aware that I was somehow apart from my body. And I remembered with surprise and wonder that I had known this feeling before. It had been before my life began, before I was born. I could feel my real self, and I recognized that I was the same self then as now. This was joyous. Then I was looking down on my entire life and seeing how unimportant all the big hassles were. I could see life as though it were a game I'd been playing. I could see how all the moves were just parts of the game. Another way to describe this feeling you have when you have been engrossed in a really good book for hours, and then you put the book aside and notice the world around you. You take a deep breath and the real world imposes itself on you, even as you continue reflecting on what you've been reading. Well, life is sort of like the story in the book. And having put it aside, I could see and reflect on life from the perspective of a higher, more real reality. I could see every part of my life, every event and incident all at once. Although it seemed instantaneous, I knew that every moment was there. These days, I might say that I downloaded my whole hard drive. At the time, I think I tried to compare it to a replay of a cassette tape in fast forward. I came to understand that so much of what we think as important is actually trivial or of no consequence. We take ourselves much too seriously. Then I was travelling down a tunnel. It didn't open up before me or draw me into it. I was just in it and really moving. I am not sure how big it was. It seemed just big enough for me to travel through it. Although I felt like I was weightless and falling, there was no sense of up or down, just along. The tunnel was mostly dark, but I could sense the sides of it rushing past. I was facing forward the whole way through, if you can be said to face in any particular way without a body. The practical part of me was looking ahead for obstacles. The rest of me was thrilled by this exhilarating ride. I tried to reach out to touch the sides, but I didn't have hands. Well, not hands that I could use as brakes anyway. And yet I still had the form of my body. I felt like laughing at that. Words are so inadequate. I remember thinking that I should feel worried about hurtling along like this, and at the same time realizing that only my body could get hurt by an impact, and I had left it behind. It was a very quick journey. A light appeared up ahead. It was the end of the tunnel, and I rushed into it and out of the tunnel. There was no sensation of slowing down or coming to a stop. I was just there. I didn't even have to look back. I found myself in a beautiful place. In everyday terms, it was like a radiant, joyous landscape on a summer afternoon. But it was so much more. It was inexpressibly beautiful, serene, and delightful, with the most wonderful light pervading everything. Something like rolling hills with carpets of wildflowers. There were many other people there, and they were all blissfully happy. I can't say how many a multitude will have to do. I was doing so much more than just seeing this. I was feeling it all with senses unimaginable. Although I can't say who they were, I knew these people, these souls, and they knew me. They radiated love and welcome. They were like family, and we rejoiced in our reunion. It was rapturous. Although we didn't have physical bodies, we still looked the same, because we still had the same form as our bodies. We could also see our real true selves. We communicated perfectly without speech. Then a radiant being of pure light appeared in the distance, and I watched as it moved slowly among us. As it came closer, I remembered thinking that I would not have been able to look at it with my physical eyes. It was such an intense, beautiful white light. The light was 100 times or even 1,000 times brighter than the sun. I was drawn irresistibly towards this being. I don't mean unwillingly. I wanted nothing else to do but to go to it, fall into it, and be embraced by it. As I came closer, I was overwhelmed by the feeling of pure love, understanding, and compassion, which emanated from this wondrous entity. This was by far the most wonderful and powerful feeling of my experience. Nothing can truly describe it. This glorious, wonderful entity recognized me, understood perfectly every minute, every minute aspect about me, and poured love into me. The love was real, as much a force as a feeling, and immeasurable. Knowing every little thing about me and my life and viewing it along with me, there was a lot of real amusement. This being had a personality. It was fun to be with, delightful, and it had a sense of humour. I never wanted to leave this divine presence. But somehow, without explanation, but with perfect understanding, I knew that I had to go back. and I understood that this was good and right. I woke up in my bed in the dark, thoroughly blown away by what had just happened to me. I walked around the house declaring, that was not a dream. It had been so real that waking life seemed like a dream for a while. About 2 years later, I read about near-death experiences for the first time. I marvelled at the accounts I read, I think in a Reader's Digest. Other people had the same experience as me, and they were saying it was a near-death thing. That made sense considering the drugs I had taken at the time. But I never realised that perhaps I had nearly died. It had been the most joyous experience for me, with no negative aspects whatsoever. And that's the end of that experience. I'm just flicking through some of the questions and answers that he has answered underneath. Okay, so one of the questions is, have your religious practices changed since your experience? And his answer is yes. I know who I am praying to and how to conduct that dialogue now. My prayers are always answered. Often I share much of my daily experience in a sort of ongoing connection with heaven. I share what I am seeing and feeling, especially moments of beauty and joy. And there is feedback when I do that. Someone asked me a while ago how often I pray, and I immediately replied, I'm doing it now because I had been most of the afternoon. I suppose I may have become a bit mystical, but with 2 feet on the ground. We are meant to live this life while we are here. Another question is, did you seem to encounter a mystical being or presence or hear an unidentifiable voice? And Brian answers, I encountered a definite being or a voice clearly of mystical or unearthly origin. There were many joyful beings, human spirits, where I went. We all knew and loved each other, and it was like a joyous reunion. It was as if they were surrounding me the moment I emerged from the tunnel. But they didn't have to surround me by being close to me. They all turned their welcoming attention to me, which was like being surrounded and in close touch. I knew this was home. Then there was the entity of light, which was incomparably bright, alive, powerful, loving, and understanding. This glorious, wonderful entity recognized me, understood perfectly every minute aspect about me, and poured love onto me. So that's Brian's experience. I'll go through it again now from the top. So this one happened 20 years ago. Sorry, I just need to sneeze. Got a bit of hay fever. So yeah, this experience happened back in 2004. So yeah, wow, that's 20 years ago now. Crazy how time is flying by the older I get, but this is how it is, isn't it? Like, I remember when I was a kid, a year would take seemingly forever, but now it's already February, and the new year seemed like it was only a couple of days ago. But yeah, this is how it is, and in a way that's a good thing, I think, because when time flies, that generally means you're supposedly having fun. So anyway, this one was written 20 years ago, and it is a near-death experience / overdose, drug-induced, I don't know. But for me, it doesn't really matter how these experiences come about. there's generally a pretty uniform pattern to them, and how people get to this point of their consciousness leaving their body is pretty irrelevant, whether it's drugs, whether it's meditation, whether it's fear of death about to come. Sometimes people jump out of their body when they think they're almost about to die, or whether it's just a near-death experience. Doesn't really matter, in my opinion. Obviously, some people might be a little bit put off by someone having an experience that is linked with drug use, but for me, I don't have a problem with it. So Brian is at the end of a 5-day bender. I don't think I have ever made it up for 5 nights in a row, so I can imagine, I think the most I've done is 2 or 3, so I could just imagine the state of someone's brain after being awake for that amount of time, and understanding that it would be in a state of total disarray, because even without drugs, if you stayed awake for that amount of time, I think you would start to go a little bit crazy and lose the plot a bit. But yeah, this is what happens. He's been up for 5 nights, and he decides to go to sleep and try to get back to reality. But in his situation, in this case, he does sort of get back to reality, but not a sleeping, restful reality that he was expecting. As soon as he lies down, he finds himself in this other dimension where the reality is even more profound, intense, real than this human physical world we are experiencing right now. He actually tries to describe it a little bit, and kind of like how he starts this story. He says, trying to explain this near-death experience is a little bit like trying to draw a magnificent sunset, a jaw-dropping or inspiring sunset with a stick and drawing it in the sand. Obviously, you're not going to get even close to what that is. The sand in the stick is not going to reflect exactly how magnificent a sunset is in real life. And he's comparing, I guess, the tools he has to describe what a sunset looks like is just a bit of sand and a stick, and it's just not satisfactory to go into the detail that this experience actually was like for him. But he gives it a go. So he kind of says, he uses a bit of another analogy here. He says, the reality we're in at the moment is comparable to when you are reading a really good book for a few hours. I guess you could say totally lost in a movie, and then you walk outside the theatre, or you put the book down, and then you notice this much richer, more intense, more real world than the book you were reading or the movie you were watching, and that's another good analogy, I think. So this is how he's using this to describe what this human life is like, what we experience in this physical realm is like the book we're reading or the movie we're watching, and when we leave the body, when we cross over to this other side, whether that be through meditation or a near-death experience, when we get to this other place, the world is suddenly transformed from reading a book to, the richness of life we experience on a daily basis here. So I guess the book is the human world, if that makes sense, that we're experiencing, and then when you put the book down and look around you and take it all in, and see how much more information and beauty and how many more experiences are all around you in this real world. I guess that this real world is an analogy for this other dimension, if that makes sense. It's a little bit confusing, but hopefully you get what I'm trying to say there. So he starts his experience off in a pretty standard way. He goes down this tunnel. His tunnel, he says, it wasn't really something that opened up for him, but it kind of drew him into it. And he sort of was, one moment he was in this physical realm, and the next he's in this tunnel and he's moving quickly. He feels weightless, and he feels like he's traveling in some sort of direction, but at the same time he says that there's kind of no up or down. It's just kind of along. And I think that's our first glimpse there of how difficult it is to use words to describe exactly what he is experiencing here. He says the tunnel is mostly dark, so that further compounds the mystery here in terms of how does he actually know that he's moving when he's in this dark environment. He feels weightless. There's no real sense of wind rushing past him. There's no sense of up or down or across. He's just claims to say that he's moving, but at the same time has nothing to compare that to. So how could he know that he is in motion when there's nothing flying past or no sensation of wind coming past him? It doesn't make much sense. He says he's facing in a certain direction, although that is an inadequate way to describe exactly the experience he's having. But he says the reason he says this is because there's a part of him that's kind of looking at a certain direction and keeping an eye out for obstacles because he's worried about crashing into something. But at the same time, he's saying that this ride is exhilarating. He wants to try and touch the sides of the tunnels, and when he tries to do that, he reaches out and finds that there's no hands here, so he has no hands. So he finds this kind of funny and says that he kind of has a bit of a laugh to himself when he realizes that his body is no longer there, and this is amusing to him. But he says words are just incredibly inadequate, and I think we get a gist of his struggles to explain exactly what this is like for him, just from what he's saying about the tunnel. And then he thinks, look, I don't have a body, so I can't really be hurt by anything. So I don't think I should be worried about crashing into something. And then he says he sees a light up ahead, like we so often hear, like even the most inexperienced near-death experience, even the most inexperienced person in terms of this topic would have heard someone dying and seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. It's a very standard definition of what some people say of their experience with death. And this is what's so good about these experiences, because we go a little bit further than that and see exactly what that actually means. So he sees this light up ahead and he rushes towards it. And when he gets to this light, he finds himself in this serene, delightful, perfect landscape. It's just magnificent in every sense. It's glowing, it's radiant, indescribably beautiful. These incredibly descriptive words that I guess are all we've got to describe what this was like for Brian. And in this landscape, it has this most wonderful light pervading everywhere. But and he says there's lots of people there as well, and they're all incredibly happy, and he can't say how many, but he has to settle for a multitude. And he says, so he's in this new landscape, he's able to see it. But he says, I'm not just seeing it. It was feeling it with all senses. So he's smelling it, he's touching it, he's tasting it. It's all kind of melding into one. And then he starts to take a bit more of a closer look at who these people are that he can see. And he says that he finds that when he does that, he begins to understand that he knows these people. He knows their souls. And they are incredibly welcoming to him. And it's like he's met his soul group or his soul family here. And they are rejoicing in his coming back. And although no one had physical bodies, he says, they still look the same because they had the same form as bodies. But underneath that, he says he can see their true selves, and they're able to talk and communicate freely and perfectly without speech. It's all done telepathically. So this is, it's always a little bit hard for me to kind of contemplate what this is like. Obviously, if the person having the experience can't fully get across what this experience is like for them, it's going to be even harder for me reading it from my point of view without ever actually witnessing it. But there's no such thing as like a physical place up in this other dimension. So when a soul goes up to these incredible landscapes, it must be a place that is, designed for them by who, I don't know, maybe their soul group creates an environment that is welcoming, that is familiar, that is, going to be the kind of place that you feel comfortable in. I guess if they manufactured some kind of alien landscape that we'd never seen before with weird looking animals, we might freak out a bit. But yeah, in this case, or in most cases, it's always like an Earth type environment, and obviously that is just an environment that's created for the individual to feel a little bit more comfortable, because you just don't hear of people going to this other realm and encountering environments that they don't recognize. I don't read many darker experiences. In fact, I don't think I ever do. I try to read the positive ones, and that's because there's not many on this website. I probably only come across a handful, and I guess when they go on these darker type near-death experiences, they do have landscapes that are more hellish and unfamiliar and unpredictable, and beings that aren't as loving as the ones that are described in this experience. But yeah, I probably think I should try and find a couple of those for people, just to give a fair representation of what people actually experience when they nearly die and go to this other realm. But at the same time, I kind of want to put more loving, positive, radiant energy out there. So I'll if I come across a good one, I will read it out for you, just in the interest of being fair and balanced. And I guess if you don't like it, you can just turn it off. But yeah, in the meantime, let's continue on this more positive, loving experience. So he's not, he's not just seeing, and I'm just trying to again step into Brian's shoes here and imagine what that's like. So he's in this incredibly blissful environment. He's looking around, but he's not just seeing. He's feeling and experiencing this place on a level that I guess goes far beyond what we have in this physical realm. It sounds like it's just this next level of just beyond human comprehension. And not only is he in this environment that's absolutely incredibly beautiful, but he's at the same time which he's not just seeing, he's experiencing. He's also with these other souls, and they're communicating with him telepathically. So there's a lot of things happening all at the same time here. And yeah, it sounds way beyond what I can really try to communicate with you, or what even Brian, who had the experience, can communicate. But yeah, that you kind of get a bit of a picture there of there's a lot going on at the same time, and it seems to be the underlying factor of all that is it's a joyous occasion, and there's lots of love and light, and it's the kind of place that is welcoming and not one that you want to leave. But just when you think it can't get any better, it does. Then there's this radiant being of pure light that comes and appears in the distance, and it slowly starts to walk among them. Now, Brian doesn't give this being a label. He doesn't call it Jesus. He doesn't call it God. He doesn't call it spiritual guide. All he says is that it is a pretty intense experience for him. He says that as this being gets closer, he begins to think to himself, well, if this was happening on Earth, when I was looking at this being with my own Brian eyes, I would have to look away, because this being is so intensely bright. And he says the light coming from it was, perhaps 1,000 times brighter than the sun. So we all know how impossible, or you can stare at the sun here, but you're going to hurt yourself. So yeah, you can imagine by what Brian's saying here that is incomparable to the brightness that's coming from this being that has suddenly graced them with its presence. And it's kind of interesting, because although this being is emanating incredibly bright light, at the same time, which would us as physical human beings would make us look away, this light in this realm is like it's drawing them in. It's like they have no choice to avoid it. It's like it's so powerful and charming and charismatic that it just draws them in, and they just want to be with it. They want to mold with it. They want to fall into it. They want to be embraced by it. And as it comes closer, there's even more sort of emotions, feelings, experiences coming off this being, and he describes them as pure love, understanding, and compassion. And just being in the presence of this being is the most powerful feeling of his experience. Nothing can truly describe it, Brian says. I'll just stop there and reflect on a little experience I had the other day at my work in the hospital. There was this guy who was there who had tried to jump through the window, and he had mental health issues. He was I don't know what the factors leading up to the event of his accident were, but he was in hospital for severe cuts to his hands and forearms. They were heavily bandaged, and he had apparently tried to escape from hospital as well, and he'd only been there for a couple of days, so his wounds were not healed enough for him to be able to be discharged, and hospital staff were worried about him getting out of there and doing himself more damage. So that meant that he had to have a staff member sitting with him around the clock to make sure he didn't try to run away again. So the other day I was the staff member that got to sit with him, and when I sat down I heard him sitting on his bed chanting some weird words, and then when he stopped, I asked him about it, and he said when he meditates, he starts speaking in tongues. And I know some of you might think, oh, this guy is crazy. He is what we on earth would call someone who is severely mentally ill, and you're absolutely right. That is the current definition of I guess, what crazy is: jumping out of windows and mumbling stuff that doesn't make sense. But after I sort of put aside my Western health science perspective and tried to put what I was taught to diagnose someone as through my studies, and started talking to him as a person, I began to see that he actually had something quite special about him. He had, a little bit of what they're talking about in this experience, this light being, and obviously it's no comparison, but as I'm reading this experience, I'm kind of drawing some comparisons in that he had this calmness about him, he had this authenticity about him, he had, for me, I was quite drawn to him, quite charming, quite charismatic, but at the same time just very humble and down to earth, and just to be honest, I wouldn't have minded sitting with him all day like I was supposed to, but I was called away after about an hour because someone else came to take over, and I just went back to my normal duties. But as I just thought I'd share that I think we've all come across people where we are drawn to them and they have that X factor that we can't quite articulate. It's just something that about some people that are, they just want you just want to spend time with them, and I tell that story just so you can kind of rack your own minds as to someone that you've come across that you can kind of use as an example to get a better picture of what Brian is experiencing at this point of time, and what that would have been like. But obviously, in this other realm, number one, it's more real than this human experience, and number two, words aren't really inadequate to describe exactly how intense and real this other environment is. So it's obviously going to be a lot, I would say, more intense and difficult to articulate how infectious or intoxicating the level of charisma and I don't know, light and love this being has. But I think Brian does a pretty good job of explaining what that is like for him. This experience is it's perfect, isn't it? He's greeted by guides. He goes to this incredible landscape, and then that's topped off by this powerful being of light that makes Brian want to fall down on his knees and worship it. But as soon as it comes into his realm, dimension, experience. He goes into a little bit more detail here as to what this experience with this being was like. I'll let you draw your own conclusions as to what to actually label it. But he says this entity recognized him. He understood every minute aspect about him and just poured love, unconditional love into Brian. And often I read these experiences and I think, okay, so what does love mean? Like, what is love? And I don't think human definitions of love are going to be adequate to really describe what love is like in this other dimension. But because we're just using plain old English words here. Well, I am, and it's just, it doesn't seem to be, even just me reading it feels like it's not really giving justice to what Brian has gone through here. And yeah, it's frustrating to think that Brian can't even articulate either how magnificent this experience was. And but on the plus side, I deeply believe that we all get to experience this at some point anyway. So even if we can't quite connect to what Brian is actually trying to convey here, or if we can and still sort of know that it's still not quite the same thing, understanding and actually experiencing, we get to experience it ourselves in the flesh or in the soul, in the spirit one day. And in the meantime, we just enjoy this experience as a human as much as we can. And it's not always easy, but it is possible. It is possible to enjoy life. And I'm only just sort of starting to realize that now because I'm almost 50, and it's funny, like when I was in my young years, my 20s and 30s, it was you'd hear that people sort of finally find a bit of peace and happiness in their 40s or 50s, and I can actually relate to what people mean by that now. It's almost like you're on the downhill slide, and you've kind of seen pretty much most of what this human life has to offer. And although there's many more experiences out there for me to and you to hopefully experience and take joy in, that we kind of get the gist. We get a bit of an experience when you get to this age. You kind of know what is around the corner. I mean, obviously you don't, but you know that life is going to throw challenges at you, that's going to hurt, that it's going to put you in places that aren't where you want to be sometimes. And obviously on the flip side, there's moments where you just want this life to never end. But yeah, you once you got that wisdom in there and you kind of know how to deal with situations in life that are either pleasurable or not, you're a little bit more confident navigating it, or at least I am anyway. And just guess it takes living it to understand that and to put that into practice. So more on this being of light and love. He says that, so he tries to explain what this love actually is. He says it was real. It's as much as a force, as a feeling, and it's infinite. It's immeasurable. It just, he kind of says the closer it got, the stronger the love got. So from there, this being starts to sit with him and give him a life review, it says. So he doesn't go into much detail at all. In fact, it's only one sentence saying, this being knew everything about me and my life, and viewing it along with me, there was real amusement. So they're watching his life. He's got this being next to him, and they're enjoying what they're seeing together. So that's nice, isn't it? Just to have a review where you're comfortable watching it. You're in an environment where you feel loved. He doesn't go into any detail as to whether he felt terrible when he saw bad aspects of it. He just says he had this being with him, and that seemed to put him at ease, and it didn't matter what he was watching. He said this being also has a personality, so it's fun to be with. It has a sense of humor, and it just sounds like Brian has instantly fallen in love with whoever this divine presence is, and just does not want to leave its side. So it's comforting to know that when we cross over, and for all those people we have lost and are in this other realm right now, that they are blessed to be with presences where they feel like they can be themselves, they can feel immense love, they don't feel judged, they're free of all this negativity that we all go through on a daily basis in this planet. And it's good to know that this is what awaits us. And then of course, inevitable happens, and poor old Brian doesn't get told he has to come back. It's more intuition, gut feel, but it goes beyond that in this other realm. It's like I'm just trying to compare what he's saying here to what it's like in our human realm. He says that it's like intuition, but it goes way beyond that. It's like perfect understanding intuition, like whereas us on earth, we have intuition and we say, okay, should I do that? Is that the right path? Should I go with my gut or should I go with my head? In this case, in this other realm, he just says, okay, I get this feeling that I have to go back to earth, and it's like crystal clear for him. He just knows. And he feels that this is the right decision to make, and it is the decision that, he doesn't even say he decides, he just goes, and then the next thing he knows, he's waking up in his bed, and he is just blown away by what he has gone through, and who wouldn't be? I mean, I don't know about you, but I've never had a dream like that. I've never had a dream which feels more real than this physical realm. I've never had a dream that feels that has had contact with these beings who are loved. I struggle to remember my dreams, let alone let alone. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is this does not seem like a dream to me, and it doesn't seem like one to Brian, and even if it did, I guess that doesn't matter, because some people have these experiences in their dreams as well. So what does that say to us? I don't know, that consciousness somehow disconnects from the body in various states, whether they be drug-induced, sleep, meditation, death, fear of death. Yeah, there's lots of times that consciousness, spirit, soul does transcend the body and mind, and I really love that people share that what happens when this occurs, because it gives us all a taste of what that is actually like for those of us who have never actually had the privilege of experiencing that. And Brian finishes off by saying this was not something he'd ever heard of about. So could you imagine he'd never heard of near-death experiences before. So could you imagine the confusion you would have felt when you woke up after that, or regained consciousness after that? It would have been very, very complex within my mind if I'd had something like that, not knowing what a near-death experience was. And he says it took about 2 to 3 years later, and then he was reading a Reader's Digest, and there was an article about near-death experiences in there. He's like, oh wow, this has happened to other people. So this is what happened to me. This is what people call it. And it doesn't go into detail, unfortunately, at the end, like some people do, as to how his life changed after that. I guess it does a little bit, not in the main article. I guess I read that question a little bit earlier in terms of what he. I might actually have a look at that again. So, yeah, he says that, after this experience, he is able to experience an ongoing connection with heaven. And he says that he's basically in a state of prayer with this other side pretty much all the time. And I can relate to that. I kind of have one mind on guides, God, heaven, when I'm experiencing my life as well. Like, I kind of encourage them into my experience, and then you do have a kind of weird connection, and it feels like you're sharing your life, and very mystical and miraculous things can occur. But yeah, he basically finishes off by saying we are meant to live this life while we're here. So we're meant to enjoy it. We're meant to do with it what we wish. It's up to us. Do what gives us pleasure and gives us meaning. And hopefully you're in a place where you can pursue some goals yourself, get some purpose into your life, whatever that is. It doesn't have to be anything big, but if you are feeling that bit of intuition to do something else with your life, change jobs, write a book, get some music happening, be creative, investigate this topic more. I don't know, whatever it is, whatever makes this life easier for you, or if you've had something gnawing at you to give it a try, learn guitar, piano, I don't know, whatever it is, write a book. Yeah, there's no reason why you shouldn't. Don't let fear stop you. Don't let that get in your way. Don't let your mind tell you, well, this could happen or that could happen. These days I try to, when that sort of situation comes into my own experience, I try to tell myself, okay, so what is the worst thing that could happen if I tried this? Okay, sure, I might get scared, humiliated for a little bit, but that will pass, and at the end of the day, I'll probably feel a lot better about myself for attempting to take a project on that scares me and giving it a good crack, and if it works out, great, and if not, so be it. So I think that's a good motto to have. What's the worst that could happen? So with that, I think I'll leave you and wish you all a good week, and send you love and gratitude, and look forward to talking to you again next week. Goodbye.